When I was a kid, first-person shooters were a dime a dozen. Doom, Heretic, Rise of the Triad, Blood, the list goes on and on. But if there was ever an FPS that truly had a style all its own, it has to be 1996's Duke Nukem 3D. What can I say about this game that hasn't been said a million times before? Is it totally over the top when it comes to its story and content? Yes. Does it feature some really weird and often totally terrifying enemies? I'm talking about Octobrains here. You betcha. Strippers? Check. Naked chicks and pods? Double check. But arguably no protagonist has ever been so overtly macho and quick on the draw with the one-liners than good old Duke himself. I actually don't know how many times I played Duke Nukem 3D in my youth, but it's at least in the low to mid-teens. It's just a game that keeps on giving no matter how many times you replay it. Now, it's no secret that Duke's been around for many years now, having made his grand gaming debut all the way back in 1991's side-scrolling action platformer Duke Nukem. But ultimately, it was 1996's Duke Nukem 3D that really catapulted him into the video game Hall of Fame. Naturally, with the massive success of Duke 3D, everybody waited in anticipation for the announcement of a sequel, and on April 27th, 1997, George Broussard, one of the co-founders of 3D Realms, let the world know that Duke Nukem Forever was on the way. Believe it or not, it was initially meant to come out sometime before Christmas 1998. Unfortunately for fans, this didn't end up happening. 3D Realms had apparently started development of a 2D version of Duke Nukem Forever, but this whole endeavor was shut down once it became apparent that 3D games were gaining popularity and were dominating the market. What would follow is nothing short of arguably the greatest story of development hell the gaming world has ever seen, at least so far. And really, the TLDR as to why this turned into such a fiasco is because of an age-old issue related to project management as a whole, a fundamental lack of planning. Early on, 3D Realms decided to use id Software's Quake 2 engine to develop Duke Nukem Forever. They even put together a reveal trailer that they showcased at E3 in 1998, and if reports are correct, critics and fans were pretty impressed with what they saw. But Broussard was worried about Duke Nukem Forever being perceived as dated upon release and began looking at competing games in an attempt to make use of the latest technology to harness for his own development purposes. As a consequence, a few weeks after E3, 3D Realms switched to the Unreal Engine, which basically meant they had to start the entire development process over from scratch. To make matters worse, this happened once again in 1999 when a newer version of the Unreal Engine became available. I think you can see where this is going. Then at E3 2001, a full 3 years after the first trailer, a new gameplay trailer with updated graphics and a Las Vegas setting was displayed to the public. Once again, critics were impressed with what they witnessed, with IGN pointing out just how much time and effort had gone into Duke Nukem Forever's development. The response from fans and critics made the devs at 3D Realms feel a sense of accomplishment and that they were well and truly ahead of their competitors. But in spite of this, it soon became apparent that Broussard still had no real idea of what the finished game would look like and that he wasn't making any concerted push to get it done. Oh, that reminds me, it was actually revealed in 2022 that the trailer that was played at E3 2001 had overrepresented what gamers could actually play in the game at that point. In other words, the whole thing was essentially a ruse to ensure fans remained invested in the game. There's nothing gamers love more than being placated. By the time 2003 rolled around, the trouble for Duke Nukem Forever was far from over. Broussard ended up butting heads with publisher Take-Two and assured CEO Jeffrey Lapin that the game would be out by the end of 2004 or, at the latest, beginning of 2005. Of course, this didn't happen, and after further rumors and a failed takeover of the project by Canadian developers Digital Extremes in 2005, Broussard announced that most of the elements for Duke Nukem Forever were complete in January 2006. Take-Two then offered a $500,000 bonus for 3D Realms if they managed to release Duke Nukem Forever by 2007, but Broussard shrugged this off and allegedly stated that they would never ship a game early. I think what he meant to say was, at all. By August 2006, it was estimated that somewhere in the region of 10 employees had left the project since 2005, ostensibly because they were tired of the lack of progress and the politics within 3D Realms. But possibly the most bizarre part of the story is that, when creative director Raphael van Lierop was hired in 2007, he actually played through what had been put together by 3D Realms and realized that there was a lot more completed content than he had originally expected. In other words, the game was pretty much close to completion. Following this stunning revelation, Lierop approached Broussard and told him they could simply finish off the game and blow everyone out of the water. But yes, you guessed it, Broussard fervently disagreed and believed Duke Nukem Forever was at least another 2 years away from being ready to go to market. Yes people, if it wasn't for Broussard's obstinance, we could have had Duke Nukem Forever as early as 2008, and it may have even been good. While Brassard seemed to become serious about completing Duke Nukem Forever by the end of 2006, and even though the size of the development team doubled, the constant delays and revisions put a massive strain on the relationship between Scott Miller, 3D Realm's other co-founder, and Brassard. Finally, in December 2007, an all-new trailer for Duke Nukem Forever was released, the first one in over 6 years. However, no release date was specified by Brassard, and while there were hopes that the fourth installment in the franchise would appear at E3 2008, this didn't eventuate. By this time, it's estimated that Brassard and Miller had spent a staggering $20 million of their own funds and found themselves in a rather sticky financial situation. The two founders then approached Take-Two and asked for $6 million to complete Duke Nukem Forever. Take-Two apparently agreed at first, but offered $2.5 million up front and another $2.5 million once the game was done. And what do you know? This just wasn't good enough for Brassard, so on the 6th of May 2009, all development on Duke Nukem Forever was suspended. 2 days later, on May 8th, Brassard and Miller fired the staff at 3D Realms, and while Take-Two retained the publishing rights for the game, they made it very clear that they were no longer funding it. Then in 2009, Take-Two sued 3D Realms for their failure to complete Duke Nukem Forever and cited an amount of $12 million that had been paid over to Infogrames for the publishing rights. The suit was concluded in 2010, with both 3D Realms and Take-Two agreeing to drop any further legal proceedings. Obviously, after so many years of work and personal investment into the project, 9 former 3D Realms employees continued developing Duke Nukem Forever from their homes. This small group of developers would go on to form Triptych Games, which would end up sharing a work premises with renowned developers Gearbox Software. 3D Realms then asked for Gearbox to help Triptych finish the game and port it to consoles. Since Randy Pitchford, the CEO of Gearbox, had actually worked on an expansion for Duke Nukem 3D and even a little on Duke Nukem Forever back in the day, he just couldn't bear to see Duke fade into obscurity. As a result, he decided to dedicate some resources toward Duke Nukem Forever, and at the 2010 Penny Arcade Expo, the game was officially re-announced. Then after a final delay, some 14 years and 44 days after its development cycle began, Duke Nukem Forever was launched on June 10th, 2011 in Europe and Australia and June 14th in the US. So obviously the question is, was the game actually any good? Of course not. Duke Nukem Forever is, as one reviewer on Steam so eloquently puts it, a near antithesis of Duke Nukem 3D. To put it bluntly, much like the drawn-together movie, The Movie, Duke Nukem Forever is crass in a really thoughtless, asinine, and mostly downright stupid way. I think I kind of get what Pitchford and the guys at Gearbox were trying to do here, but really, the end product is just way too try-hard in the worst way imaginable. Sure, Duke Nukem 3D featured adult humor, some swearing, and some fairly cheesy toilet humor, and a good scoop of just straight up cheese, but it wasn't so overt and in your face that it was cringeworthy or idiotic. Shooting an alien seemingly taking a dump or using a urinal to relieve yourself was just something that would make you chuckle or smile wryly. These are a few fun features that gave Duke Nukem 3D personality and actually made it down to earth and human. You know that whole thing about relatability? Yeah, Duke Nukem Forever has pretty much none of that. The general humor is just bad and barely worth mentioning. There's tons of excessive and gratuitous nudity, toilet humor that only the drawn-together movie might rival, and an endless slew of profanity. If anything, if most of this had just been dialed back and more focus was put on gameplay and Duke's persona, it could have been infinitely better. But from the looks of things, the worst part of Duke Nukem Forever is that, for many fans, it's just boring, or certainly nowhere near as fun and memorable as its predecessor. At worst, Duke Nukem Forever is a near irredeemable dumpster fire of a game. At best, it's just kinda meh. Judging by the reviews on Steam, opinions on the game are fairly divided, though I suspect the Enhanced Edition mod, which was released at the end of 2022, may have some part to play in the game's ratings being somewhat improved. From what I understand, the mod improves gameplay and, according to one reviewer, turns Duke Nukem Forever into a whole new game. Still, the story of Duke Nukem Forever is a very sad one, and I gotta say, and I'm sure you all agree, Duke deserved so much better than what he got. So is it all over for the Duke Nukem franchise after the failure of Duke Nukem Forever? I wouldn't say that, but I don't think you should expect a new game anytime soon. That said, a Duke Nukem movie is seemingly in the works. From the looks of things, the creators of Cobra Kai are working on a live-action movie adaptation of Duke Nukem, so if handled correctly, it could be seriously epic. I mean, could its production be any more problematic than Duke Nukem Forever? Please God, say no. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Duke and really hope that any new additions to the franchise, whether they're games, movies, or otherwise, will be worthy of his legend. And so ends another video, fam. Have you played Duke Nukem Forever? If so, what are your thoughts? Is it really as bad as people say, or is the hate unjustified? Let us know in the comments. Make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for daily gaming, VR, and tech content. From me and the crew here at Metasquad, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Later!